All right. Hello, my friends. It's Jill Osborne from the Interstitial Cystitis Network. It is Sunday, December 8th of 2024, and it is time for another live IC support group meeting. Now, I have to say, I had a particularly challenging week this week. So I'm, recovering from surgery, recovering from life, recovering from cancer is hard. And I have a lot of up and downs, and my body is just struggling. Like right now, my left incision is quite unhappy with me. Anyway, such is life. So my name is Jill Osborne. I'm the founder of the Interstitial Cystitis Network. I do live support group meetings weekly or a couple of times a month here on YouTube and Facebook. We are streaming right now on 2 platforms. When I look this way, I'm looking at Facebook. When I'm looking over here, I am looking at YouTube. Hello, YouTube. I see you guys in there. My purpose in doing these meetings is to help you to be strong, knowledgeable, informed. I want you to feel confident when you're working with your doctors. I want you to feel like you're in control when you work with your doctors. I want you to be a partner in those discussions. I don't want you to be passive. I want you to be active. This is all about education and information. You can listen. The last thing I need you to do is walk into your doctor's office and burst into tears and say, "Do anything. I don't care what you do. Just make it go away." It doesn't work that way. There's no one treatment fits all approach for this. Because IC is, in fact, a pain condition for which there are many potential causes. And your job is to try to figure out what your underlying cause is. We don't want to spend years, months, years, decades doing therapies that have no chance of working. We don't want to chase the symptoms. We want to find and reveal the underlying cause. This is called phenotyping. This is what we do now. So we're no longer condemning patients by saying, "Hey, you have an incurable bladder disease. Here's some medication. Here's the diet. I'll see you in 6 months." We don't do that anymore. Now, we had this week our meeting of the International IC Patient Organization. And, it's interesting to see and comforting to know that there are groups around the world that are trying to help patients like you and I. But we all face significant challenges. And that's particularly true now for 2 reasons. Number one, we don't have as much time with our doctors. It's really hard to have a good discussion with your doctor. The odds are, if you're a typical IC patient, you've had symptoms for a significant period of time, you can't cover all those symptoms in a 10-minute appointment. And yet around the world, it is very, very consistent that our time with our doctors is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And that, again, is why you coming to meetings like this is so incredibly important. Because I need you to be so knowledgeable that you can use those 10 minutes really, really well. Now, we're blessed in the United States because we have 2 national groups. We have the Interstitial Cystitis Network and the ICA. So, and just so you know, for those of you who don't know, I originally was an ICA support group leader over 30 years ago. But I was very interested bringing support to patients who were home. The ICA was doing a lot of research. I was more interested working directly with patients. And that's really the genesis of how our groups split and the IC network was born so long ago. We have much more abundant resources here in the United States than a lot of patients have in other countries. For example, we have quite a few supplements now, which are absolutely gaining a really significant place in the IC world because so many treatments have been found to have a lot of adverse events or they're very expensive and you just can't afford them, yada, yada, yada. Some international groups are very small. They might add 20 members in 6 months. We usually add 20 members in a week here. I am very, very determined from day one when I worked with international groups. One of the trends that I noticed is that the Americans were rather rude and dominating. And so when I started working with international groups, which was first the International IC Patient Network, and then international cooperation died for many, many years. And now it's back up again, run by a wonderful lady named Matilda. And I'm really happy that the Americans are taking a back seat. We don't need to be leaders. We shouldn't be leaders. We need to let the other groups fly and grow. That is my attitude on this. That. The other thing that we talked about is a very, very concerning growth in pharmaceutical company influence in our world. And this is certainly a trend that we're all seeing. And that is that, we want the treatment to fit the patient. We don't want to force patient on treatments. We want to make sure that the treatment fits that unique case of that patient. But the way our medical system works is that it is big pharma who have the money to try to get things through clinical trials to get them FDA approved. And then once they're FDA approved, then pretty much every doctor prescribes them. And I don't disagree with that at all. We need really good abundant testing. But we have to make sure that those products are really regulated well. So for example, with Elmeron, we now know it's linked to retinal disease. And it's linked to inflammatory bowel disease. There's a strong association with both. So how was that missed in the 25 plus years that it had been approved? I don't know. That's why there were so many lawsuits. Try to figure that out. Something new happened. And that is, there is now two big things. Okay, so there is a pharmaceutical company based in India that has created a generic Elmeron, pentosan polysulfate. And they recently, I was told secondhand, this was not firsthand, I was told that they suggested that there's no need for patient groups anymore because AI will do the job. That a patient group doesn't need to be funded anymore when we have artificial intelligence. And I'm like, oh, hell no. No, because artificial intelligence can be skewed to say what the company wants to say. And one of the participants shared with me something else that I really found very, very concerning. And you know that consumer rights are very important to me. Consumer safety is very, very important to me. So they had a study done last year out of, oh, hello, Monica from Norway. It's so nice to see you, Monica. I have family in Drammen myself right now. How do you know that a generic medication is safe? How do you know that? So, for example, Elmeron, which was the FDA-approved medication for IC, went through incredibly abundant research testing. And yes, it was flawed. And yes, we found some issues after the fact with the eyes. But there's no doubt that that original safety testing was very, 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 very rigorous. And of course, Elmeron was quite expensive and the cost increased over time. So many, many patients simply couldn't afford this therapy. So we'd all been waiting for generic. Hi, Sue. We'd all been waiting for generic medication. Well, a company in India has made that generic medication. It is now available in Europe. It is now available in Canada. It's not available in the United States. Why? Well, it turns out that it's not exactly the same. It's not the same. That there are very small, subtle differences in the generic form of pentosan that are very different than the FDA-approved form. And so we have a study that came out which compared 6 samples of FDA-approved and then 6 samples from different companies who had all made quote unquote generic Pitocin. And there were significant differences. The problem here is that they're so different that the researchers in that study concluded that the current safety studies for Elmeron should not apply to the generic, that it was essentially a new medication, and that they believed that it needed new rigorous safety testing. And I will post that study that was sent to me by a friend. Here, hold on a second. Let me see if I can just grab that real quick. So hold on. Let me just grab that real quick because there's a deep, deep concern that just absolutely shocked me. Okay, so hold on a sec. Okay, so the study was done, chemical and biological differences between original mimetic Pitocin polysulfate. Okay, so hold on a sec. Let me just grab this. So this is really I'm really talking to the patients who are outside of the United States right now. Okay, because I think you need to know about this. Here, hold on. Okay, hold on. I'm just pulling up the study. Give me one quick sec. You know me, I will boldly go where other people don't necessarily go because I think that your rights are very, very important. Here it is. It is called The Chemical and Biological Differences Between Original and Mimetic Pitocin Polysulfates. Elmeron, scientific name is Pitocin polysulfate. This is a free article. All right, hold on a sec. Let me just go to the actual article here. Okay, so again, they took samples from the approved, they put samples from the genetic, they looked at it in a lot of different ways. They used chromatography, they used nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy, they used infrared spectroscopy. They did all sorts of things to just actually look at the molecule to see if it was the same. And what they found was that, quote, the study revealed significant structural and biological differences between Pitocin from different sources. Therefore, follow-on products cannot be considered identical, but at best similar to the original Pitocin polysulfate. However, their similar efficacy and safety have still to be proven by comprehensive study. Now, several years ago, we had, whoops, hold on a sec. We had a catastrophic problem with heparin that killed many people around the world. That it turned out that heparin is derived from cow guts. And if I remember correctly, I mean, don't quote me on this because this was a while ago. If I remember correctly, there was a problem with the delivery of the raw materials into the factories, and that the factories basically were quite filthy. I remember reading an FDA report about the state of the factories in China. You know, that here in the United States, the FDA can go in and do an inspection randomly. In China, you have to give them a lot of notice. You got to give them like 6 weeks notice. So they clean everything up, they make everything spot and polish for that inspector. Then once the inspector is gone, bam, who knows? And that's one of the reasons why I really try not to bring anything from China that's a consumable into um, the IC network shop. Now, the other thing that's really interesting is pentosan polysulfate actually comes from wood. It comes from beech trees. You might not have known that. It's obtained by sulfation of a specified pentosan hydrothermally extracted from beech wood. Fascinated. It consists of fully sulfated. Anyway, you don't need to know all the scientific stuff. But I want to go to this conclusion here because they raised something quite concerning. So, with this whole heparin debacle, what they discovered is that the heparin, it was like over sulfated chondroitin sulfate. It was something like that was driving all of the severe illnesses and deaths in this heparin debacle so long ago. And here we go. Here it is. So they talk about that in this paper. And I want to see if I can read that specific section here to you. Oversulfated chondroitin sulfates. They found, okay. The curves of both the oversulfated chondroitin sulfate and M1 display some special features. Number one, the course of concentration. Dependent activation was either bell-shaped, especially for the oversulfated chondroitin sulfate after short incubation times, which is in line with the findings in the course of the heparin scandal in 2008. Okay. And in their conclusion, despite its limitations, PK activation assay in plasma turned out to be a valuable biomarker in the heparin scandal of 2008. There was a clear association between the effects of the clinically applied heparin batches contaminated with this in this assay and observed adverse events in 2008. And I'd like to find the exact sentence here. Basically, they felt that there was a little too much unexpected. Here's the conclusion. I want to get this right. Several questions for further investigation arise from the study. Which chemical differences are responsible for the effects observed in the assays? What are the detailed modes of action of pentosan polysulfate and especially pentosan polysulfate mimetics? How should the results of the PPS mimetics and bioassays be dealt with? I'm sorry, guys, you just bear with me. In view to their similarity to oversulfated chondroitin sulfates, a compound with a proven safety risk. In conclusion, our study gives evidence that pentosan is a complex drug and that products from different manufacturers are chemically and functionally not identical, but at best similar. The structural differences most likely resulted from the individually applied production processes and confirm the well-established principle of, quote, the process defines the product in the field of biologic and non-biologic drug substances. Okay. None of the products from different manufacturers analyzed fulfills any characteristics or requirements to be classified as a generic product of another manufacturer, but each which represents a new medical entity in a regulatory sense, unless its similarity is convincingly and demonstrated by further investigations. Okay, and this paper was done by Bene Pharma in Germany in 2003. And it's an obscure chemical journal called Carbohydrate Polymers. Okay, so what am I trying to say here? While generics make sense, they have to be true generics. This pentosan polysulfate from the other manufacturers does not, in the opinion of these researchers, is not a true generic. It represents a brand new medication that should have its own safety testing because it has a profile of oversulfated chondroitin sulfate similar to that which killed people in the heparin scandal of 2008. Now, how many of you would have known that? I didn't know that because I don't read the Journal of Carbohydrate Polymers. Thankfully, another IC group in Europe did find that article. They did forward it to me. And I am now letting you know that if you're in Europe, if you're in Canada, I can't tell you that generic pentosan polysulfate is safe because this study suggests that it needs more research to prove that it's safe. Am I saying it's unsafe? No, I'm saying we don't know. You know, and I think that's really the problem with kind of healthcare today and treatment today is that we're all like ping pong balls being thrown back and forth by doctors and by treatment companies. And at some point in time, we all have to stop and say, no, wait. I'm not going to take this other medication until you tell me about it, and I want to know that it's safe. Now, the other thing that's really, really important, if you look at our AUA guidelines for IC, and guys, I'm sorry for being a nerd here, but I just need to be a nerd for a little bit. If you look at our American Urology Association guidelines for IC, you know, they've evolved in the last 15 years. The most recent round talks specifically about drug safety. They show that medications like Elmeron, Pentosan have significant risks, but they rely on the doctor to tell you the risks. They say you, the patient, should be making the decision as to whether you want to risk taking this medication because of a good discussion you have with your doctor. Now, how many of you do that? Do you have time in a 10-minute meeting to actually do that? No, of course you don't. And the thing is you're all so desperate. I was so desperate. It's like, just give me anything, please. You grab the prescription or they enter it in the computer. You go down, you go to the pharmacy, you get it. It's like, thank God I have a treatment. There's no education here. There's no information here. And that's where we have to fight back. You cannot be a passive participant anymore. You need to be an active participant. So it was a very, very, very good international meeting. It was short, but it was really, really productive. And I want to just publicly thank Matilda and the other IC groups for including me. I haven't been able to do much because of my surgery, so I missed our last meeting. But it's just so important that we all work together. It's so important we remember that we're a family. It's so important that you not let influencers manipulate you for money. I don't want to this is free. I'm not manipulating you for money in any way in this meeting. My job is to just educate you, and I take that very, very seriously. The other big thing that happened this week, you may not have heard, is that you know, again, 2024, the weirdest year of all. Like, what is wrong with this year? So, like, literally, I'm 5 minutes going into a Zoom with a company when all the phones go off with a disaster alert. And actually, it was in the bathroom. And I hear all the phones. So, okay, somebody was kidnapped, right? And then they went off again. Like a minute later, they went off again. We had a 7.0 earthquake not far from me. And then we had a tsunami warning. So let's just say that my anxiety has been up. Like I immediately went around the house and I pulled everything heavy so that nothing would hit me. So anyway, it's been a bit of a chaotic week for me. Yeah, the earthquake, Carrie. Yeah. All right. Want to talk a little bit about the holidays. So I sent out our big newsletter last night. In the newsletter, I did talk about the new research, like the new lactoferrin study, which is great. Um, it's 2 weeks from Christmas. And before I start taking your questions, we just got to do a down and dirty discussion about the holidays. When you have, I see. So here, give me a quick second. Let me just pull up that email. Like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do Christmas. I just don't know. The symptoms, the nausea, and just recovering from surgery is just rough. So hold on a sec. So in my newsletter, we launched a new survey. Does medical marijuana help? Now listen, medical marijuana is approved now in 47 states in the United States. It is, whether you agree with it or not, the reality is that there are patients out there who are not getting adequate pain care. They are getting prescriptions for medical marijuana, and for some patients, it's helping them. And so we launched a new survey where we're asking patients how they're using it. We're differentiating between smoking, vaping, topical, suppositories. We want to really hear what you're doing. For those of you that it's working for, I'm asking for your brand names because I want to try to share that. I will tell you, in our past study, medical marijuana was very, very good for the most part at relaxing muscles and controlling symptoms. There were only a few patients who flared from marijuana in general, and usually that was the smoking form. I'm also asking patients what seems to work best for their condition. Is it pure CBD, a combination of CBD and THC, or just THC? So if you don't get our magazine, I will put this. It's not yet on our website. I can give you the URL. Let me, you know what? Let me just put the URL in the chats here. So for any of you watching this, if you could go over and do this survey on medical marijuana, that would be so awesome. All right. So here, hold on a sec. All right. So Facebook, here is your link to that survey. You know, because we're in it for the patients. We're in it for the patient. Listen, when you've been up all night crying your eyes out, begging for somebody to help your bladder and to help you with the pain, things like medical marijuana have a place. I've been there. I have been there. I was there for years until I finally got better. All right, so here you go. YouTube, let me give you the link to, here, hold on a sec. It's a SurveyMonkey, surveymonkey.com. And then it's, what's the actual link here? And then it's an R, hold on. ICMMJ. All right. So YouTube, there you go. You guys have the link to that survey. Please help us understand how it's being used. Because listen, for 2025, this is all about comfort. This is all about making sure that you've got what you need to get through the day, to get your life back, and to not suffer as so many of us have suffered over the years. Okay. Last but not least, I've got another thing I want to talk about too. Let's talk about the holidays here for a moment. So, you know, Every year, patients ask how can they make their holidays more comfortable and happy. If you're newly diagnosed, this may be your first holiday with IC, and several questions come to mind, such as eating your favorite foods, can you travel comfortably, explaining IC to family over holiday tables, and more. So, who better to share tips on how to get through it than us? Because we've been there. We want to share our knowledge with you. So I got 10 quick tips. Number one, perfection is not an option. Do not try to be perfect. If you expect a perfect holiday, perfect children, perfect gifts, perfect health, and perfect friends, you will be in for a major disappointment. Life just isn't perfect, and we shouldn't try to meet that impossible standard, especially during the holidays. Please remember that our most precious memories are usually the spontaneous moments of laughter when someone sings off key, the smell of fresh baked cookies, decorating a tree, sitting in front of a fire, or maybe a great snow fight. Be spontaneous and enjoy the small pleasures of the day. In my newsletter, I also shared an article from Julie Beyer, who wrote about one of her favorite Christmas memories. Actually, was when her entire family had the flu, and they couldn't go to Christmas. They had to stay home, so they stayed in their jammies all day. They all got comfortable under Afghans. They opened their presents really slowly, and they had beef stew. And she said it was perfect. It was slow, it was memorable, it was peaceful, it was kind. And so just remember, perfection is not an option, okay? You don't have to be perfect. It's okay if somebody gets sick. Number two, give yourself permission to gently say no. Listen, we love our families, but during the holidays, their expectations can be quite different from our ability to fulfill them. And I will share that, listen, my mother was a master of guilt during the holidays. It didn't matter if I was in pain or not. She could play me like a fiddle. Y'all met her. She was in these meetings for many, many years. She knew exactly what to say to get me out of bed, get in the car, to drive somewhere, even though I was in agony. And finally, one year at Christmas, I said, no, I'm not going. I hurt too much. And I will tell you that was liberating for me. It was liberating to actually stay home with a heating pad, a good movie, and yet, you know what? I will admit I cried as they drove home. I mean, as they left. I absolutely cried. I wanted to be there at Christmas, but my body said no. And it turned out that's a very fond memory for me, was staying home with icy friendly foods, watching a great movie, and I said, "Bring me stuff home." And, when they got home 4 or 5 hours later, I had a little Christmas thing with them. If you need to stay home, stay home. One of the things that I really regret is a couple of times I went to my sister's house and I was in such a severe flare, I had to go upstairs and lie in her bed. And so the whole day became, what's wrong with Jill? Is Jill okay? It's Jill okay? And that's not okay. I didn't want the day to be about how I felt bad. And the irony is now we're all older. My sister, my brother, and I. We all have our health issues, and we all don't feel good at quite often because of what we're personally going through. So anyway, it's okay to stay home if you need to stay home. Number three, surviving holiday parties. You received the invitation. You're dying to go, but wonder if you'd be able to eat or drink anything. If it's a dinner invitation, talk with your hostess and explain that you greatly appreciate the invitation, but you have some diet limitations. Ask her about the menu, and if necessary, can you bring some food that you can substitute on your plate? But a really wise strategy before any holiday party is for you to eat before you go to the party, so you're just not hungry. Eat the foods you need to eat before you go, and then you can nibble when you get there. That works every time. Number four, if you can't get to that party, bring the party to your house. Bring the party here. If you're unable to travel, have a holiday potluck at your house for family, friends, and explain that traveling is difficult and that you just want to stay home. Best of all, by offering a potluck, you ask your guests to bring their favorite holiday foods. This is a great idea for singles who are away from home, or away from their own families. So invite your neighbors and your friends and begin your own holiday traditions. Number five, don't carry the holidays on your shoulders. Moms, I'm talking to you out there. We all know how easy it is to carry all the responsibility on your shoulders. God forbid you have IC and any other major illness or injury at this time when everyone expects so much, especially us. Sometimes you really can't do it all. And think about it. The holidays are supposed to be about sharing and caring. This is the time for you to ask for help if you need it. From cleaning the house to wrapping presents, make a schedule early. Let everyone know they need to carry their fair share. Even young children can put their dishes in the dishwasher or straighten up the bathroom. Number 6, select a precious tradition. Now, listen, every family member may have a different way of celebrating the holidays. For some, it might be going to church. For others, it might be going to a matinee movie on Christmas days. For some, it might be caroling. I love Christmas caroling. For others, it's about spending a day or two baking. That's my big thing. I love baking. And yet others really want to go help others during the holidays. They might want to go work at a food bank. Okay, so ask each member of your family what single tradition they want to keep this year, and then try to make one special moment for each member of your family. And it's okay to let old traditions go as they just aren't as meaningful as they used to be. For example, I didn't put all the Christmas decorations up this year. I put ones I liked up, but I'm letting some go. My theme is a little bit different. Number 7, find peace in nature. Do you feel like life is running you rather than you running your life? The best way to step off the runaway train of stress in 2024 is to get outside and enjoy the serenity of nature and wild things. Whether it's raking up leaves, walking in a park, ice skating, or just putting up your outdoor lights, being out of the house can lift your spirits and reduce that feeling of being trapped. So before this meeting, I walked up and down my street 5 times. Got to get out of the house. Number 8, let your children create some holiday magic. Not feeling well enough to put up your holiday lights or go get a Christmas tree? Many families let their children do the bulk of the decorating. My mom did. So buy a few craft magazines, let the kids huddle over them, and then create a new magical theme every year. My sister and I bought our Christmas tree. By the time she was in high school and I was in junior high, we went out and bought the Christmas tree. We didn't put that burden on my mom. Absolutely not. Number 9, seek support for the holiday blues. It's normal for many people to become depressed or develop a serious case of the blahs during the holidays. This is especially true for families who are struggling with illness, who are grieving the loss of a loved one. Break that isolation by getting out of your house at least once a day. And if you're not feeling up to getting outside, call somebody, call a family member and a friend. And watch for signs of stress, such as headache, restlessness, anger. If it gets too much or feeling seriously depressed or having suicidal thoughts, please ask for help from a professional. You can call 1-800-SUICIDE, which is answered 24 hours a day by compassionate and generous professionals. You deserve a shoulder to lean on. These professionals can help. I talked with my therapist this week. Okay, and number 10, give yourself as a gift. The best gift that you can give yourself and your family is you. You are irreplaceable. You have to take care of yourself before you can start taking care of everyone else. So please take frequent breaks to regain your energy, pace yourself and eat well, indulge in the holiday spirit when you can. And for those days when you're not your best, take a step back, rest, and relax. There will be more holidays. Okay. Now, last but not least, I can talk forever about this stuff. I 2 weeks ago decided that I was sick of social media. I was sick of YouTube. I was sick of videos. I was sick of all of that. And it's like, Jill, what do you want to do with your time? And I thought, you know what? Listen, I absolutely love classes. I'm a nerd. It's okay. If it's a craft class, whatever, I'm happy to take a class. Got to keep that brain working. If you don't use it, you're going to lose it. So you're going to keep it using. So I've taken 2 classes so far. I'm taking classes from Harvard that are free. Guys, Harvard University. You can take a Harvard University class right now today for free. Just Google Harvard free courses online and check them out. So I am right now taking a 6 weeks course on anxiety and stress management using research approved techniques because you know what? At this point in time, I even though I teach stress management, my stress level has been really difficult the last 2 years, and I clearly feel like I need some help and some new skills. So, anyway, I'm taking this really interesting self-guided class. Now, the first section of the class was how do you recharge? How do you recharge yourself? Like every day after the stress of the day, what do you do at the end of the day to build your energy back up? And this class said it's got to be short, 10 to 15 minutes. It's got to bring you joy. It's got to be reproducible and something you want to do every day. So like, is it going for a walk? Is it listening to music? Is it closing your eyes and meditate? Whatever. What do you do to recharge yourself? I will say that I had never asked myself that question before. When I was working, I used to go to the gym afterwards, but I don't belong to a gym right now and I'd love to go back, but I'm not going to go back because of COVID quite yet. So what do I do? Well, I have some show and tell because I paint. I paint. And I have now painted 12 paintings this year. And I do the really advanced paint by numbers that you buy on Amazon. My sister got me one for Christmas last year, and I fell in love with painting. And so I'm going to show you the 3 that I've done for Christmas. Okay. Is this just not adorable? This is a paint by numbers. And like literally, I just at the end of the night for an hour, maybe 2 hours, I put on a video, put on some music, and I paint. This is my decorating theme for this year. I am in love with this painting. Is it just not the cutest thing in the world? Okay. The second one is done. I haven't put it on stretcher bars yet. Is this one. A polar bear giving a present to a penguin. Isn't that adorable? This is how I recharge now. And it's amazing because my state of mind is actually really good. That's what I told my therapist. I said, I don't feel like I'm grieving as much. I don't feel like I'm as depressed as I was a couple months ago. Okay, and this is the one I'm working on right now. Isn't that neat? So this is, you can get them on Amazon, but I'm getting these from a website that's like Numbers Paint. And they're very, very intricate. You can see that they're really, really intricate. Oh my God, I love doing these. So anyway, how do you recharge? What do you do to calm yourself down, bring yourself some joy, rest and relax? What do you do? All right, let's go to your questions. All right, so for you guys on YouTube, you guys are being very quiet. Feel free to ask a question. Hello, Linda from Chicago. Nice to see you. I hope the weather is good. I don't know if you guys are dealing with snow right now. It is warm here. All right, let's go to Facebook here. Hello, Sue. Nice to see you. Ann says, what is better, intrarosa or estrogen? Honey, it's really about what works for you. You can try either one and see how you do. Hello, Harriet. I hope you're feeling well. Sandra says, thank you for raising support for this. Even doctors don't know as much as you. I've had it for over 14 years. I suffer every day, and you're in pain right now. It's Sandra. What kind of flare are you having? Do you know? Are you having a bladder wall flare or pelvic floor flare or stress flare? Sue said, Well, here, hold on. Aaron said, "Hope you're feeling well." I am. Yee. I had a lot of nausea this week. A lot of nausea this week. Um, you know, just they say that's normal after breast cancer surgery, but I was on a blood thinner that just destroyed my stomach. I mean, my God, I am back to the old days when I have to eat really, really, really small meals. That was Pradaxa, a blood thinner, because I went into AFib briefly. And I didn't know the damage it was doing, and the damage is just enormous. So my stomach is just like, yikes. Okay. Sue said, had my Botox injections this week with nerve blocks, which keep you numb for about 2.5, 3 days. I wish you could just stay home like that. It's the only time I ever don't feel pain in 40 years. It makes me so sad when it wears off. I'm trying to regulate everything through the pain. Uh, Here, I'm sorry, hun. It keeps my stream keeps going to the bottom, so I lose what you wrote here. Oh my god, it keeps doing it. Really, really, really. Stop it. Let me see what she's wrote. Trying to regulate everything through the pain. You have to go to mom's house with family. You usually have 2 weeks of help for the Botox kicks in the last. Good luck, honey. Listen, you have family that can care for your mom. You don't have to take all of that on your shoulders. Learn from my experience. I did all of the care for my parents and had no idea the toll that would take on my body the year afterwards. No regrets, but holy moly, I would have done things differently if I could have. Nan says, "Oh my gosh, here, hold on a sec. I hope I Yes, good. Okay. You guys are talking about the earthquake. Monica says it was on the news in Norway. Listen, I got to tell you, that earthquake was 45 miles off the Pacific coast. I'm about 20 miles from the ocean. If that had an epicenter on land, I would not be doing this stream right now. It, I mean, a 7.0 earthquake is a really big earthquake. And I was thinking about that afterwards, going, okay, do I have all my water's old? I got to replace all my water. I have food. We would lose power probably. I don't know how long we would lose power for. The gas lanes would break, the freeways would break, the internet would be down because the cell phones would be down. It's like I mean, let's just say, and then like literally for 24 hours afterwards, I was just like walking through waiting for an aftershock because we did have a big aftershock. My dad taught me never buy a house on the flatlands in earthquake country because that's when liquefaction occurs, where the soil does this and it just basically becomes mud and then everything that it supports is damaged. And so thankfully, this house that he bought is on a hillside on top of granite. And we have massive earthquake bracing underneath the house. And so I feel pretty safe where I am, but it was scary. Sue said, I fractured my elbow in 2 different spots 2 days in a row right before Thanksgiving. I was so relieved that I didn't have to do Thanksgiving. Things have been a little overwhelming with my mom being extremely ill with her cancer right now. Yeah, honey. And then one of the reasons why you were injured is you were overtired. Yeah. Gay said her family's having a potluck for Christmas. Way to go. So's mine. I just hope I can get there. I kind of learned to take the emotionality out of it. Like, I love Christmas. I love the decorating. I love everything up to Christmas Eve. But the stress of Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, I find overwhelming. And again, a lot of that had to do with my mom. And now that she's gone, I don't feel that quite so much. But, you know, when people say you have to get together, you have to get together, that takes the fun out of it. It just does. So I'm going to try to wait until that morning. I want to see how I feel. And if I feel good, I'll go. And if I don't feel good, I'll stay home. I'll cry, but I'll stay home. Here it's you guys, you like my painting? Thank you. It's just like literally, it's just like the best thing I've painted. And you'll notice the colors kind of match our logo. And this is my style. I like a light background, like on walls, but I like really big pops of color. And so this is me. Like, it's just so pretty. I'm going to have them all hanging in my kitchen. Harriet scrapbooks. Monica sews. I love sewing too. Just give me something. Just give me something to do with my hands. Give me something where I can just use my right brain. Anne says, what webs? Anne, just Google it. Free courses, free classes, Harvard, or just do free classes anywhere. Google has a Google University. There are a lot of free classes all over the place. Monica says, can you elaborate on phenotypes, especially Draven? What are the typical symptoms? Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. So, again, we now recognize that bladder treatments don't work for the great majority of patients. Why? Because for most of us, IC is actually not a bladder disease. IC is actually a pelvic pain syndrome for which there are many potential causes. And so today, rather than condemning a patient to be on bladder medications for the rest of their lives, what we do is we try to get to the underlying cause. And in my newsletter that I sent out, I described what happens and what most of us have been through. And that is, you have all these terrible symptoms. The doctor says, okay, let's look in your bladder. They look in your bladder, it's normal and healthy. And you're laying there going, what? How is that possible? I'm in agony. And the doctor goes, I don't know, shrugs. And then they prescribe another bladder treatment for a perfectly healthy bladder. Does that make sense? Does that make any sense at all? And the answer, of course, is no, it doesn't. If you've got a healthy bladder, then don't waste your time doing bladder therapy. I've always had a healthy bladder. Bladder therapy's never worked for me. What worked for me was pelvic floor physical therapy combined with things that calm down nerves. We now realize that 85% of IC patients likely have a neuromuscular origin for their symptoms. And that's why it infuriates me that in Europe, like the only approved treatment is a bladder treatment. It's like, no, guys, no. We know bladder treatments don't work for most of us. So we do something called phenotyping. We want to figure out the underlying cause of your symptoms. And so I use a system that was proposed 7 years ago by Dr. Christopher Payne, who ran the IC research program at Stanford University. And he believes that there are 5 core groups, but he says there's probably more. Okay, so his first group is a group that everybody suggests. Everybody agrees with. It's called Hunner's lesions. If you have a visible wound on your bladder, you have a lesion on your bladder, an ulcer on your bladder, that is a distinct patient group. That's only about 5% of IC patients. Hunner's lesion patients have always been considered the most difficult to treat. They don't respond to typical bladder therapies. Their pain levels tend to be very high. They tend to be very, very food reactive. And some are down, some might be down to eating 4 or 5 foods. Their bladder is so sensitive. Why? Because they have a wound in their bladder. They have a visible wound in their bladder. When you biopsy that wound, you find massive inflammation. There is basically a biological war. Your immune system is working hard in your bladder to do something, to figure out, to treat something. But now we have a clue what your immune system is fighting, and that is a viral infection. It was researchers in Europe who began to find viral DNA in the urine of patients with with Hunner's lesions, but not in patients without Hunner's lesions. We have now multiple studies that have validated that. The virus is the Epstein-Barr virus, also known as mononucleosis. We are now testing, not me specifically, but researchers are now testing antivirals as a treatment for Hunner's lesions. So Hunner's lesions have their own unique treatments. Doing Elmeron with a lesion, if it's a viral infection, makes absolutely no sense. In contrast, doing lactoferrin, given that we have a new research study which shows that lactoferrin was remarkably good at reducing inflammation of the bladder wall and almost completely healing Hunner's lesions, makes a lot more sense, along with antivirals and things like that. Okay, so that's group number 1. Group number 2, bladder wall driven. In the bladder wall driven group, we've got 3 variants that we're going to look for. Variant number 1 is chemical injury of the bladder, chemocystitis. So these are the patients whose symptoms begin because they've gone through or are going through chemotherapy, because the chemicals or the chemo are damaging to the tissue of the bladder. These patients might be drinking way too much green tea, black tea, soda, energy drink. That's going to irritate the bladder wall. So for these patients, that's why when you work with me, I'm going to ask, have you gone through chemo? Did your symptoms begin after chemotherapy? Or are you a junk food junkie and you're drinking a massive amount of coffee or green tea or soda? The bladder is not impervious. The bladder can be injured like any other part of your body, and generally it's injured through some sort of toxic chemical exposure. The second thing we're going to look for in this group is just your age and estrogen levels. Genitourinary syndrome of menopause. So think about your bladder. It's the only organ in the human body designed to hold toxic waste. Urine contains ammonia, urea, all sorts of toxic byproducts if you smoke. So how can the bladder hold ammonia for hours and hours at a time and not get damaged? It's a real evolutionary marvel, because it turns out the way your bladder protects itself is with a really thick coating of mucus. And I have a, where is it? Here it is. Okay. So let's look at this for a moment. So this is kind of a slice of what your bladder would look like. This is an old Elmeron educational postcard. So here is the nerves and the blood vessels. Here is the urothelium. So these are the biggest cells in the human body. We call them umbrella cells. And they have what we call tight junctions. They're very, very tightly fitted against each other to prevent urine from getting down here. But on top of this is a mucosal layer. And of course, it's not blue. This is just for demonstration purposes. That you can see the mucosal layer acts, it's hydrophobic. It pushes water away. It pushes urine away. So it pushes the irritants in urine away. Okay? Unfortunately, this mucus is estrogen dependent. So when you're young and have a lot of estrogen, you have a lot of mucus. But if you're on birth control, if you're on Lupron for endometriosis, if you're just getting older, you've had a hysterectomy, guess what? You don't have the estrogen anymore, which means you don't have the mucus anymore, which means now your mucosal layer is getting thinner and thinner, which means the irritants in urine are now getting down here on the skin and doing bad things. The quality and health of your skin is important here. So this is estrogen atrophy is not a disease process. It's going to feel like a bladder infection. You assume you have a bladder infection, but it is not infection at all. It is, in fact, just a thinning of the bladder wall, a thinning of the mucosal layer. So, how do we treat this? We're going to treat this, first of all, with estrogen. Because when you give that skin estrogen, it immediately starts to produce mucus. So our therapeutic priority for these patients is to improve the quality and health of their skin and try to get mucus in there again. Topical estrogen is a way that we do that. Now, I was just working with a patient who is 79 years old. She's got severe estrogen atrophy. She had never used estrogen before, even though the doctors told it to her years ago. She just didn't understand the importance of it. And so I warned her, I said, now listen, when you first start using estrogen, it's going to burn. It will probably burn you. It might even scare you. It might burn you so much. Don't be scared. That's normal. That burning is a direct reflection of how dry your skin is. Basically, her skin was like this. You put estrogen on that, and that some of the chemicals in that cream is going to irritate some of the skin. It's normal the first few times you do estrogen, it's completely normal to have burning. But every time you use that estrogen, the skin produces mucus. So it takes about 10 days, 2 weeks for the burning to go away, and it should go away. She called me terrified because she was in so much pain. She was so anxious. And it's like her doctor told her, I told her, and yet she panicked. You don't have to panic. That just means your skin is dry. Keep using it. And that's what her doctor told her to do. Her doctor said, just come on, just use it for a week. Let's see if we can get you through this. She needed a lot of comfort on the phone, and I spent a lot of time with her yesterday, as a matter of fact, getting her through this moment. Okay, so your quality and health of your skin matters. That's not a disease. That is estrogen atrophy. So therapeutically, what's going to work for these patients aside from estrogen? Maybe something that will have a coating effect. And that's where Elmeron really was successful because it was a bit of a chemical band-aid. But of course, now we know that Elmeron has issues with eye disease. So it's kind of off the table for quite a few patients. And so this is where we go instead to kind of the chondroitin-based supplements like Cystoprotect, Bladder Builder, Bladder Rest, things like that. We have some supplements that will have a similar coating effect. At least we believe that's what they do. Back when Cystoprotect was created, which was the first chondroitin-based supplement well over 20 years ago, Dr. Thea Harides did a large study of over 250 patients who took it for 6 months. And there was a significant improvement in their symptoms with chondroitin. So this is not a company just saying, hey, I'm going to make some money and I found this disease called IC. Let's see what suckers they'll buy. I mean, how much can we fleece them for? And there are supplement companies out there that do that. These supplements have been created by major IC researchers or people who are very, very focused specifically on the needs of IC patients because they might have a family member or they themselves might struggle with it. So again, chondroitin-based supplement. Okay. The third thing we're going to look for in the bladder wall-driven group is a chronic infection. Because when you think about a UTI, you think bacteria. Guess what? You can have a fungal infection in your bladder. You can have a candida infection in your bladder. And you can have a viral infection in your bladder. So it was our own National Institutes of Health who actually proved and made a direct correlation between increasing levels of candida in urine and bladder pain in the IC patient. Okay, so again, this is the big federal IC research group. The more fungus you have in your bladder, the more pain you will live with. And the problem here is that here you've got all the symptoms of a UTI. You call your doctor, they do a urine culture. That only checks for bacteria. That doesn't check for fungus. A next generation DNA urine test will check for fungus. So why are we more prone to having fungal infections? because we've been on a hell of a lot of antibiotics. If there's one patient group massively overtreated with antibiotics, it's an IC patient. Because when you go to the doctor, you say, "Hey, I have a UTI." They go, "Okay, let's do long-term antibiotics." There's still people out there saying, "Take long-term antibiotics." Well, now we know the price that happens when you take long-term antibiotics. It kills the good bacteria to keep the fungus in check. And I'm going to tell you, fungal infections in the bladder are worse than typical IC. I know this because I had one for 2 years. I had a drug-resistant Candida glabrata infection that began when I did Augmentin for 3 months back in the 90s when we all thought IC was infection. So believe me, I wanted to get better. I did it too. I did high levels of Augmentin for 3 months. My doctor would only do 3 months. And it didn't work for my IC at all. But what it did do is it gave me a super drug resistant Candida glabrata infection. And the pain was insane. How did they know it was Candida glabrata? So, fungus is the plant. Fungus is usually round, but there are different species of Candida. Candida glabrata is very stemmy. It has long stems, and then it has round things at the end of the last stem. And that's exactly what I had when they looked at it under a microscope. And they were like, "All right, you've got a Candida glabrata infection." And we did massive antifungals. Taking 1 or 2 diflucans does not work for these types of infections most of the time. And when you look at the drug information safety sheet for diflucan, you will see that there's a little section that says some fungal infections need more than 1 or 2 pills. I was one of those. I did 3 courses of diflucan 3 times a day, 450 milligrams a day for 7 days. Very high, extremely high. It's so much so they were worried about my liver. But that was finally what killed this stupid infection from antibiotics. So I am very careful when I take antibiotics. And I have taken them twice this year, which I hadn't done in decades. And that's because I had pneumonia. I had pneumonia and then I had a post-op infection and I had to. Okay, so if you flare when you eat carbs, if you flare when you eat sugar, my Candida glabrata infection grew whenever I ate ice cream. If I ate ice cream, that night it would start growing in my bladder and the pain was off the charts. So if you think you have a fungal infection based upon your symptoms, you can ask for a next generation DNA urine test or ask the doctor to check on that. Okay, let's go to our third phenotype. Our third phenotype is pelvic floor driven. This is 85% of IC patients. 85% of IC patients are believed to have tight dysfunctional muscles. Now, of course, you've got all the symptoms of a UTI. You call your doctor and say, "Hey, doc, I think I have a UTI." They give you antibiotics. They don't work. Your culture comes back negative, but they put you on antibiotics anyway, just in case. They don't work. Then somebody goes, maybe you've got overactive bladder. They put you on overactive bladder meds. Then eventually you get the, I hate to break it to you, you have interstitial cystitis. You're going, I'm glad to have a diagnosis. You get the Elmeron or whatever med they give you. You get the antidepressant. You get the diet. You go home, you do it. Like, you're just so happy to have a diagnosis. I'll do it. You're going to follow that rigid diet. You're going to take these meds for a month, 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. But you still flare. You still flare. Your symptoms might be a little better, but the problem is you're still suffering. You still have to limit your diet. What does that mean? It means that bladder treatments aren't fixing the underlying problem, because bladder treatments don't fix tight pelvic floor muscles. Pelvic floor physical therapy fixes tight pelvic floor muscles. There is a legacy to tight pelvic floor muscles. It's called ischemia or ischemia. The pelvic floor muscles are skeletal muscles in your pelvis. They go from left to right, front to back, low to high. basically a webbing that holds your organs in place. But what makes these muscles very, very unique is that they have 3 holes in them for women and 2 holes for men. There's a hole for the urethra, there's a hole for the vagina, and there's a hole for the rectum. So what happens if they get tight? They squeeze the urethra closed. They squeeze the vagina. They squeeze the rectum. Constipation, anybody? Look at tight pelvic floor muscles. Pain with sex? Look at tight pelvic floor muscles. Can't pee on command? You sit on the toilet 5, 10, 15, 20 seconds? Look at your tight pelvic floor muscles. If you have a normal bladder, look at your muscles. And look especially for histories of trauma. Have you ever, I was working with a patient who had a very, very, very bad fall on her tailbone when she was a kid. And again, this week, she has never had pain-free sex. Sex has always been painful for her. That's not normal. She thought that was normal. That's not normal. And now she's been diagnosed with IC and she's got the widespread pain, all stemming from that early injury, a catastrophic injury to her pelvis. Pelvic floor physical therapy outperforms bladder treatments 2-to-1 in research studies. 2-to-1. Pretty much every bladder treatment study funded by the National Institutes of Health has failed. Why? Because most of us are not driven by a fundamental problem with the bladder. The problem is tight muscles and nerves are damaging the bladder, are changing the way the bladder behaves. So yes, it feels like a bladder infection, but it's not a bladder infection. And in fact, we just had this morning across my desk a new study which basically showed, let me see if I can find it, that pelvic floor muscles are far more likely to cause urinary frequency urgency than the bladder itself. Let's see if I can find that. Well, anyway, again, we have more research showing that it's actually the muscles driving the urinary symptom. Okay, so our therapeutic priority here is to lose the squeezing effect, because it should not be squeezing anything, especially it should not be squeezing blood vessels and nerves. Hold on a sec. Okay. Our fourth phenotype, Monica, let me tell you, I can talk about this forever, is pudendal neuralgia. These are patients who have pain when they sit down that gets better when they stand up. These are patients who have nerve pain, pins and needles, areas of numbness, sciatica, burning mouth, persistent genital arousal disorder. If your symptoms change with body position, that's all about muscle squeezing nerves. So therapeutically, what we're going to do is figure out which nerve is being compressed, where it's being compressed. We're going to try to relax the muscles in that location. We're going to do therapies that are going to calm that nerve down. Something as simple as topical lidocaine that you use on your skin can be quite helpful. And then last but not least, our final subtype is a subtype everybody else agrees with, and they believe that this is a subtype which has basically made all those bladder therapies fail, research studies fail. Widespread pain. Patients who have multiple pain conditions, I'm in this group, IC, IBS, vulvodynia, TMJ, areas of numbness. I mean, it's not areas of numbness, migraines, fibromyalgia. Multiple pain conditions characterized by having very sensitive skin, a wicked sense of smell. So what is that? Well, you really don't have all these painful bladder diseases or painful conditions, whether it's your bladder or your bowel or your vulva. What you have is an injured central nervous system. It's called widespread pain. Chronic overlapping pain conditions. This occurs when the central nervous system is injured. And generally, what the research shows is for 80% of the children who develop widespread pain as an adult, there's a major physical injury, like that woman who had that bad injury on her tailbone. So we're looking for physical trauma, being hit by cars, breaking arms, breaking legs, breaking hips, bike accidents, falling off of horses, jamming your crotch on the bar of a bicycle. Or if you were an athlete, where you fell a lot, whether it's gymnastics or ice skating or football, or softball or baseball, where you're sliding in, you're landing on your hip and you're sliding in. We know that it takes 14 days of pain to put the brain into a constant state of fight or flight, which shows that the central nervous system is involved. So again, that history of injury. For the other 20% of us, it is a history of violence or abuse, what we call adverse childhood events. So there can be sexual abuse. It can be growing up in the home of an alcoholic. There can be attacks. I was attacked when I was quite young by a young man who later raped and murdered my neighbor. I lived in fear for a decade. That is exactly why my brain became hypervigilant, and I lived in a state of fight or flight for 35 years. When you're the patient, you're desperate to figure out what's wrong. I felt like I was damaged goods. I felt like I was being punished. I was watching my friends all get married and having babies. I was at home laying on the bathroom floor. It's a miracle I got through grad school, but it was night school. In the morning, I was always laying in my bathroom with cramps. The blessing here, now that we know this, we can take all the shame and all the blame away. It's not your fault. You have done nothing wrong. There is no shame or blame attached to chronic overlapping pain. You were hurt. I was hurt. There was injury. And therapeutically, we're going to focus on things that calm nerves down. We've got to get your brain out of fight or flight, because here's the problem. The mechanism underlying all this widespread pain is your central nervous system's history of trauma. And every time you've been traumatized, your brain becomes an amplifier of pain. So think about an electric guitar. In the electric guitar, how do you make it louder? You either pluck it really hard or you plug it into an amplifier. Well, trauma turns the central nervous system into an amplifier of pain. It does. The more trauma you have, the more pain you're going to experience. And so what we have to do are some really clear basic techniques that can bring that trauma back down, that can kind of de-escalate and de-amplify the central nervous system. I think one of the biggest things that I share with patients is I'm so sorry that you were hurt. I'm so sorry that you were abused. It shouldn't happen. It should not have happened. The blessing, though, is that you're an adult. It will never happen again. It will never happen again, because you are not a child. You can defend yourself. And in many cases, the aggressor is dead, whatever. Yeah. But our brain still thinks we're young. I have shared that all my whole life, because I lived in terror for so long with this guy, whenever I go on a vacation, all my brain thinks about is coming home, because that's my brain remembering that when I left my house, I was attacked many times. And I'm starting a new form of therapy, EMDR, because I want to finally go on a vacation and thoroughly enjoy myself, instead of all the time my brain going, you need to get home, you need to get home, you need to get home. That's a legacy of trauma. So for those of us who have widespread pain, we're going to be doing more central nervous system strategies, mindfulness strategies, anxiety management strategies. And really the goal here is to get our entire brain to just calm itself down. Okay. Now we have more phenotypes. Other doctors have proposed more phenotypes, but those are the core phenotypes that I think best represent us. So I'm pelvic floor driven and widespread pain. That's me. And I will tell you that most of my related conditions have been gone for years. Once I calmed my central nervous system down, once I got my muscles relaxed, the whole pain throughout all of my body calmed down. All right. Monica says, I tried D-Manus for my bladder pain a few days ago and nearly all my pain went away. Do you know what that means? Why did it work? Well, D-Manus does nothing for the bladder wall. It is not a therapy for the bladder wall. D-Manus binds to E. coli and helps flush E. coli out of your body. So maybe you had an E. coli bladder infection and it's helping to slough off that infection or get that infection out of your bladder. But D-Manus is not a treatment for the bladder wall. It is not a treatment for estrogen atrophy. It's not a treatment for any of those phenotypes. It really only applies if you struggle with E. coli-based bladder infection. Sue said, I was just going to say that you should have them framed for your kitchen. I'm not going to frame them. I like them unframed. Sue says, it's really messed up. As I told my family, I don't technically have IC, but now it's used against me. But I'm not talking about my children and husband. There's just not enough public awareness of how awful having painful bladder syndrome and pelvic floor issues is. Yeah, we have to educate them. Denise says, pelvic floor physical therapy helped me so much. I had stopped a few weeks ago because I was doing so well, but decided to go back again because I was getting flares again. It's not terrible, but it is uncomfortable. I've never found pelvic floor physical therapy to be painful. It is weird. I always know how my muscles are doing based upon how I pee. If I can pee like a horse, I'm good. But if I'm stopping and starting, sometimes I even feel like oh God, how would I describe it? It's like the muscles are kind of frozen right down in my crotch. I mean, they're not really frozen, but they just tend to get kind of stiff. And when that happens, I know I've got to go get my wand and do my internal pelvic floor work. And it just kind of comes and goes depending upon how much I'm sitting and how much I'm stressing those muscles. Mary said, do you have any influence with Dr. Evans? I'm in some desperate shape and need to see a good doctor ASAP, but they're saying a 4 to 5 month wait. I'm in Canada, no help there. It's definitely my bladder infection. You're in constant pain. If you Google Robert Evans, his personal email address is right on his page. Go ahead and email him. I haven't, honestly, normally I exchange email with him a couple times a year. I think I last got an email from him maybe before my surgery. Maybe. He's a good guy. Robert Evans is, in my opinion, probably the best IC doctor in the United States. He's based at Wake Forest in North Carolina. Whenever we had votes for the Doctor of the Year, he won easily by hundreds of votes. He won exponentially. The great majority of his patients love him. There's a few who, it's maybe not the best fit. But he is a master diagnostician. He is an incredible surgeon. He does their bladder transplant surgery. But most importantly, it's his depth of experience. He's worked with IC patients his entire career. And so if anybody's seen anything, funky going on in an IC patient or a misdiagnosis, it's going to be somebody like Dr. Evans. So get an appointment in the books. Just get the appointment there. Don't wait. Just get the soonest appointment they'll give you. You can always call once a week and ask for cancellations. Call Monday morning, see if they have any cancellations. You never know. Be the squeaky wheel. Just be respectful. You don't want to alienate anybody. And you got to understand that the people who are answering the phone and making the appointments, they're stressed out. They're dealing with lots of people who are calling who are frustrated that they can't get in right away. And the last thing you want to do is mouth off at them. You want them to be your friend. Just be kind, be considerate, and say, you're asking for a second opinion. You'd like the earliest appointment they can give you, and just say, is it okay if I call you to see if there are cancellations? I don't know anybody who would say no to that. Okay. Hi, Renee. Hi, Lori. Mary said, if you've had no estrogen for 20 years, can you ever get this better? Is there no way out of this? All the creams burn. You can't do it. It makes your bladder insane. Also, you can't use creams that burn if you're already in agony. Mary, it's a very, very good point. So if a cream burns, then you go to an oil. Sometimes what you have to do first is you have to just slowly but steadily protect that skin to try to help the skin calm down. And you can do that with something like, hey, get back up there. All right. Vulva balm. So you have to remember that this skin needs something that's hydrophobic. It needs something oily to push urine off of the skin, to push chemicals off the skin. And so whether it's coconut oil, whether it's vulva balm, whether it's a Vaseline, getting in there every day and protecting that skin is an important part of this process, because the more you pee, the urine gets on your vulva and it burns your vulva. So pick an oil, pick whatever, again, coconut oil, Vaseline, vulva balm, whatever. We have Intimate Rose vulva balm also. That's quite good. Pick one of those, begin to use them very, very consistently. Dry skin is your enemy. And hopefully over time, the nerves that are being tweaked will slowly calm down. And as they calm down, maybe, just maybe, you will not be as reactive to when you actually start using estrogen. That would be one thought. Another thing too is you can ask them, can they put the estrogen in Vaseline? I had a doctor put estrogen and lidocaine in Vaseline for me. That never burned. That was awesome. So they can play with the base. They can use an oil. They can use Vaseline. Give it a shot. The one thing we know is that this skin responds beautifully to estrogen. It does. They've watched it under an electron microscope. The cells plump up and they start to produce mucus. The challenge is a lot of women wait way too long until their skin gets really, really, really dry. And then you're stuck with this pain until the cells regenerate and start to protect themselves more. The other thing you could do is maybe a topical lidocaine that will numb those nerves before you put it on. Maybe, I don't know. You're going to have to really work with your doctor on that. Work with a compounding pharmacy too, and see what they can do to change the base. I really like the idea, though, the combination of estrogen, Vaseline, and lidocaine. I have mine here. Hold on. I started getting pins and needles in my vulva, and I thought it was yeast. And it turned out it wasn't. It turned out it was pudendal neuralgia, that my muscles had gotten unusually tight and they were squeezing the nerves. And so my doctor prescribed the pelvic pain specialist in San Francisco said, Jill, don't you know that this is pudendal neuralgia? And I'm like, no, I've never had pins and needles in my vulva before. You go, yeah, we see it every day. So this is what she prescribed for me. And unfortunately, the label fell off because I've had this for a couple of years now. So again, it's just an oily coating and it's got lidocaine and estrogen in it. And I'm keeping this sucker. I'm not getting rid of it because it really helped me. Hold on a sec. Nina, I don't know why you're putting your WhatsApp number in there. Hold on a second. Mary says, are pelvic floor driven patients affected by food, sugar, acidic? Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Because you're in a state of ischemia. The muscles are so tight, they're squeezing the blood vessels that normally support the healthy bladder wall. Listen, if your bladder's only getting half of the blood supply it needs because your muscles are so tight, are you going to have a healthy bladder wall? Of course you won't, because your bladder's not getting oxygen and nutrition. It's gonna suffer. You're gonna have more sensitivity. You're gonna have more frequency, urgency, and food sensitivity from very, very tight pelvic floor muscles. But once you restore blood supply and the bladder is now getting its normal level of blood flow, the bladder should heal. Jennifer says, here, hold on. I have to adjust my incisions are just like talking to me. I pulled weeds yesterday. Hold on. Okay. Jennifer said, I've been taking estrogen 2 times a week, hyaluronic inserts 2 times a week, pre-leaf tablets, and G-manos. My urinary and sexual health symptoms are much, much better. Good. Very, very good. I have this one spot on my incision that just throbs every now and then. Stop it. Stop it, stop it, stop it. Okay. For those of you who don't know, I had a double mastectomy for breast cancer last summer. Denise said, my urologist told me I had IC. I asked her if it ever goes away. She shrugged her shoulders and said, sometimes, handed me a list of pelvic floor physical therapy, never told me about a low acid diet. I found out through a friend who also had IC. Well, I mean, Denise, you got to understand, IC doesn't really mean anything. And in fact, most of the world is no longer using the term interstitial cystitis to describe this. We're calling it bladder pain syndrome or pelvic pain syndrome. And so the name interstitial cystitis now is going to go away probably in the next 5 years, even here in the United States. I'm going to have to change the name of my company and the IC network. Interstitial cystitis implies there's a problem with the interstitial layer of the bladder wall when there is no problem there. Again, most of us are neuromuscular. So you know, I'm going to say that your urologist is not familiar with the concept of phenotyping, and it will go away in some patients. In those patients who have tight pelvic floor muscles, if they get physical therapy, it should go away. If they have Hunner's lesions, it's a different story. Hunner's lesions are harder to treat. If they have estrogen atrophy, the bladder wall should improve with estrogen and some therapy. But remember, it's not a one treatment fits all approach. Come on, stop it. Oh my God. I have to wear this brace over my incisions. Oh, just bear with me here. This is my life right now. Okay. Renee says, "Is a PCR urine test same as microgen?" Yes. I had a PCR. It found 3 bacteria I'd never heard of before and phosphomycin cleared it. Good. Excellent. Mary says, "The confusing part is all these phenotypes are intertwined. Atrophy causes infection, which then causes central nervous system to wind up." You're absolutely right, girl. You're absolutely right. But it's the chicken versus the egg dilemma. Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? And for us, it's which comes first, the bladder, the pelvic floor, or the nervous system. We're not going to just treat one and ignore the other three. We got to treat all of them simultaneously if necessary. But there's still an underlying problem driving it all. And that's what phenotyping helps us to reveal so that we can treat it. Lori says, "Thank you, Jill. Your constant and consistent support of those who suffer from IC is lovingly profound. Understanding and treating estrogen atrophy and pelvic floor weakness has been somewhat of a miracle intervention. I'm in my 9th month of regularly using estrogen, taking LNC, arginine, Cystomend, eliminating diet, spice from my diet, using pre-leaf when I'm in doubt, dinner parties, restaurants, routine pelvic floor exercises. I am now 75% in control of my pain. Woohoo! Yeah, baby. You, not my MD or my pelvic floor practitioner, offered this treatment, knowledge, and relief in this old body of mine. I'm wishing you a meaningful season of love and giving. You're so both. Gratitude and peace to you from all the way in New Zealand." Oh, honey, or you just like, oh my God, you just totally made my day. When you face struggles and you ask, why me? Um, I truly believe that struggles make us stronger. And that if we go through something, that after we've gone through that, we might be able to help somebody else. And that was the only way I could process all the blank that I'd gone through when I was younger and all the trauma of being attacked and then having all these pain conditions, is that God meant for me to use it in some way. And so it'd be really easy to give up. I talk to you guys every day. I've been there. I can tell you the day and the time. Um, but I just like innately believe that we are here for each other. That regardless of all the craziness out there, fundamentally, it's how we treat each other that matters the most. If you can look yourself in the mirror at the end of the day and be proud of what you've done that day, that's a good day. And so I just, like, whenever I flare, it's just like, what am I supposed to learn from this? I get breast cancer, really not having a clue of all the IC patients who have gone through breast cancer. And now I've been there. Literally. Literally. I want to start a separate group for IC and breast cancer patients, or just cancer patients in general, because the burden of cancer on top of pelvic pain sucks. But anyway, Lori, thank you so much. I'm so glad that I was able to help you. Mary saying, "Does Dr. Evans believe in PCR testing?" I have never talked to him about it. I don't know. Mary says, "Does the vulva bomb go inside?" No. The vulva bomb usually stays on the outside. But there are other things that you can do internally. Um, but again, you're so sensitive right now. I think you're just going to have to work into it. If you can use the estrogen, again, if you can protect that skin with something that's oily first, do that consistently. And then slowly but steadily, maybe start introducing just a little bit of estrogen, a little bit here and there, and see if your skin will slowly but steadily start to accept it. I don't know if it was you I was talking with this week, but she had a nurse practitioner who told her put some Vaseline on her vulva first, and then put the estrogen on top of that. And I think that's an interesting strategy. That's a very, very interesting strategy. Denise said, "How long should you do physical therapy in the low acid diet?" Well, it depends upon how your body's responding to that physical therapy. The question that you always ask that physical therapist is, are my muscles responding to therapy? Or are they always locking back down into tension? My muscles on my left side always lock back down into tension. Why? Because of my bones, because of my SI joint. My SI joint moves too much, and so my muscles lock down too tight to stabilize the joint. And so until I get that joint fixed, my muscles are always going to be tight on that one side. Although every now and then it's the other side. It's so weird. And the low acid diet, on the IC Network website, we have our diet list. There's 3 columns: bladder friendly, try it, and caution. So the most patients can eat most of the bladder friendly foods right away. And most patients can probably eat 90% of the try it foods. But it's a slow and gradual process of figuring out which foods you can eat and which foods you can't. And so don't be afraid to eat. There's no reason to be afraid to eat. This is about uh, being patient and consistent, and just trying things one at a time. Every day, try a new food. See how you do with it. And I've shared, like, I can drink lemonade now. I drink lemonade every day. I didn't drink lemonade for 30 years. I can drink it now. Doesn't bother me at all because my bladder is healthy now. Mary said, "Oh, let's see. We're so grateful. We're all in a tough situation sometimes." Oh, you're welcome, honey. And she said, "So sorry about the breast cancer, but it's so true that no one realizes others until they are in it. Doctors don't realize the pain we are in." Yeah. Nidio says, "What's the doctor's name, please?" That's Robert Evans, Evans, at Wake Forest University. Basically, there are 3 top docs in the IC world. That's Robert Evans at Wake Forest, Ken Peters at Corewell Health, formerly known as Beaumont Health outside of Detroit, and Robert Moldwin in Long Island at the Long Island Pelvic Pain Center. I think he's there's a specific name for it, part of Long Island University. But they're all getting older. I'm getting older. We were all the big people, 20 years ago. But all of us now, we were all in that same generation, are all in our 60s, maybe even 70s. Dr. Robert Eckenberg is 85, and he's still seeing patients. Robert Eckenberg in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, is the nation's leading pelvic pain doctor, in my opinion. He's fabulous, tremendous depth of experience, and he's one of the few who really understand. I mean, here's the problem that he points out, because he's been fighting this for years. For the widespread pain patient, okay, if you go to a urologist, they focus on the bladder. If you go to a gastroenterologist, they focus on the bowel. If you go to a gynecologist, they focus on the uterus and the reproductive tract. Medical schools don't teach pain neuroscience. They just don't. And so when you're that widespread pain patient, you're thinking you're going to somebody that understands the fundamental principles of pain science. They don't. And you know that because so many of them refuse pain care. So he has his new book. I just did the book review. In fact, I should read. I think I'll read the book review. Um, where he has been for the last 10 years trying to create pelvic pain centers of excellence. He's trying to train doctors around the country in how to evaluate a true IC pelvic pain patient without compartmentalizing and focusing on one organ group. That's the fundamental flaw. Let me grab my book review real quick. Hold on. I feel like I have ants crawling across my chest right now. So annoying, but survivable and normal. Okay, let me read my book review for this because I think it's so his book, his brand new book that just came out a month ago, and I helped him with the editing, and then I did the desktop publishing for him, just as a gift because he's such a nice guy, he deserves it. Handbook on treating chronic pelvic pain, genital, and sexual pain disorders. So here's my review. Have you had a cystoscopy certain that your doctor would find a severe bladder disease or perhaps even cancer, only to be told it looked perfectly normal? And you then ask, well, what's causing all my bladder pain? Well, your doctor might have shrugged in response and said, we don't know, and prescribed yet another bladder treatment for what appeared to be a healthy bladder. Does that make sense? Well, of course it doesn't. Dr. Robert Eckenberg, one of the pioneering clinicians in pelvic pain, has released a new book that explains this paradox. Chronic bladder, reproductive, and bowel pain are often not driven by the organs themselves, but by the central nervous system. And the most effective way to ease these patients' suffering is by implementing strategies that calm nerves and reduce muscle tension. Yet, as he laments, medical schools don't teach young doctors about pain neuroscience, nor do many professional medical organizations. He's trying to change that. His book details a groundbreaking pelvic pain treatment program that he's been developing for the past 20 years. The Eckenberg protocol is a robust system that can be implemented in clinics around the country that focuses on provider education and skill development, 21st century neuroscience principles, and most of all, the implementation of a system that better identifies the underlying cause of pain and the use of the more effective treatments. His system is less costly because it results in fewer invasive tests, surgeries, and ER visits, and does not force the patient to see multiple specialists, for which, for many, is just simply too costly. Now, the challenges of pelvic pain patients are many, given the poor understanding of pain processing among organ-specific specialties such as urology, gynecology, urogynecology, or gastroenterology. Dr. Eckenberg writes, quote, pain management practitioners commonly know little about pain disorders in the pelvis, and pelvic trained practitioners are not very well versed in the science of pain processing. And interestingly, physical therapists have become the new frontline caregivers because their training in neuromuscular aspects of the pelvic region has incorporated some of these neuroscience and trauma-based principles. His book discusses the challenges of treating sexual pain, genital pain, such as vulvodynia, penile, clitoral pain, and genital hyperarousal disorders, all of which are far more common than we thought in the past. His discussion of interstitial cystitis is insightful, offering, quote, I see as one of the conditions that commonly reveals itself as, quote, the perfect storm of hypersensitivity in the deep pelvis. The 2,300 complex pelvic pain patients he's seen over the past 20 decades, 60 to 75% had bladder pain at least as part of their presenting symptoms. One key question is how this hypersensitivity starts in the first place. Research suggests that trauma plays a critical role in the development of chronic pelvic pain. The more trauma a patient has experienced, the more the central nervous system amplifies pain throughout the body. He wrote, quote, A realization of how the body and brain respond to threats, fear, and other traumatic events is important in understanding the development and evolution of chronic pain in all parts of the body. Throughout the book, you'll find numerous links to research, lectures, videos, and more, highlighting the work of experts in the field, such as Daniel Claw at the University of Michigan or Dr. Lorimer Moseley at the University of Adelaide in Australia. And finally, his book discusses the Eckenberg protocol in depth, including the keys to a successful program, the implementation of the explained pain educational model, the importance of maintaining safety and compassion for each patient, and the use of minimally invasive treatments that can reduce pain. He said, quote, "One thing I do know is if I'd had known all these principles of how and why chronic pain develops, it would have been so much easier and more effective to treat the many women that I've met over my previous 35 years as an OBGYN. I also now know, after doing a 2 to 3 hour initial interviews and detailed physical examinations on over 2,200 complex pelvic pain patients, that virtually all patients I encounter wonder why none of the specialists they had seen had ever talked to them about pain itself and how the body normally reacts to trauma. His system emphasizes the need for a multimodal integrative approach to prevent increasing isolation and fear while allowing the body to proceed with healing as it knows how to do. The key to turning down the volume of sensory input is to bring the dial down with treatments and therapies that are low, slow, incremental, and safe. As an ebook, this professional memoir contains many clickable resources and information documenting the success of this approach to pelvic and genital pain, both for patients and their healthcare providers. Dr. Eckenberg hopes to pass forward a sustainable, teachable model of care and spark further academic study to develop centers of excellence for this underserved population who continue to search for answers, diagnoses, and treatment. I highly recommend this resource for those of you who are still searching. You will better understand what your body is telling you and how to regain control, and you too will want to pass it forward. You can learn more and buy a copy of his book. It's only an ebook at his website, theeckenberginstitute.com. That's THE, and then Eckenberg is spelled ECHENBERG, and then Institute, INSTITUTE.com. So that's another book for anybody, you're just trying to build your knowledge, especially if you have multiple pain conditions. Get his book and read it. I mean, hopefully you've already read IC 101 is not just a bladder disease. Guys, it's Christmas. If you know anybody out there who's got IC, I've got a really good list of Christmas gift ideas in our shop. But seriously, what are you doing to get your knowledge level up on this? I mean, many people are blown away by what I talk about. Because, when you're on the internet, you're just like reading other patients' posts and getting scared. You want information. You want factual information. I'm giving you factual information. Do not rely on social media to educate yourself. It does not work. You have to start reading books. And the first book that you should start with is that book, IC 101. It's not just a bladder disease. I'm a co-author of that book. That is the only book that talks about phenotyping, and we were ahead than most doctors. And if you can, buy a copy and then lend it or give it to another friend who has IC. It's available on Kindle. It's available on a lot of cross platforms as an ebook, and it's also available in print. I think it's $9.99 as an ebook. Like, what are you waiting for? Let's get your knowledge level up there. Thank you, Nydia. Mary says, thank you for the book info. I read a lot. Yes. So, so I'm here to take any question that you have. We've been here for 2 hours so far. Some meetings go long, some meetings go short. I'm always happy to start up a Zoom if anybody wants to talk to me one on one right now or in a small group where you can talk to me and you're not just hearing me talk. I'm always happy to set up a Zoom if anybody wants to do that today. So give me your questions and let me. Mary, you're fine, honey. You're absolutely fine. So hold on a second. Let me go back here. Um, Hold on a second. So I did send out my newsletter last night to 30, how many people? I don't know, like 45,000 patients. Um, and the lead story in the newsletter was, of course, the lactoferrin study, because that's just a seminal moment in time. Um, Lactoferrin is an essential part of our immune system. It's found in all of our tears and our vaginal fluid and our seminal fluid. All human body secretions contain lactoferrin. Lactoferrin is what we call the front line of defense for the immune system. It has antibacterial, antiviral, and antifungal effects. The way it does that is it actually binds iron so that bacteria and other pathogens cannot use that iron to grow. It is an essential part of colostrum. So when a baby is born, the most important part is them getting colostrum immediately from their mother's breast milk, because breast milk helps build the biome in that baby and their immune system in that baby. We have now many studies now that have studied the effectiveness of a lactoferrin in adults. And again, it's showing a wide range of success. And because it's naturally found in the human body, it is considered very safe. The safety profile is truly exceptional. So I would encourage you to do your own research into it too. I do have the lactoferrin article on our website now with links to the research. What that research showed, it was so the same research team first last year showed that lactoferrin helped with recurring E. coli infection. And there are a group of women who struggle with recurring infections related to their skin health and the loss of estrogen, but the infections are found consistently, and that's just because the skin can't defend itself. That's all. And therapeutically for these patients, treating them is challenging because they then get massively overexposed to antibiotics, and until they get their skin better, with estrogen, they're going to just struggle with infection over and over and over again. So to have something like lactoferrin, which is a supplement that might help improve their body defenses, is important. The same research team then released a study with IC in August. 31 patients, all with a history of flares, some severe, some minor. They all took lactoferrin from a company. The product name was Valpalf. It's only available in Europe, not available in the United States. And they took it for about 4 months. They took 1,000 milligrams a day for 7 days. They took 400 milligrams a day for 2 weeks. And they took 200 milligrams a day for 2 months. What made this study truly remarkable is that they not only evaluated symptoms, they took blood tests to measure inflammatory markers in the blood, and they did cystoscopies before and after treatment to look at the bladder. And the results were just remarkable. The 28 out of 31 had no bladder symptoms, no flares after treatment. Their inflammatory markers were reduced, and their bladder walls basically had healed. They were almost completely healed, and Hunter's lesions were almost resolved. The other 3 in the study had 1 flare. And so this was a remarkable study for 2 reasons. It was remarkable because it showed that the redness and inflammation in on the bladder wall could heal or improve. And this was the first supplement that showed some success with Hunner's lesions. Now, is this a complete heal? No. No. The exact language, I was just going over the exact language in the study with somebody yesterday, and I can actually read it to you. The exact language in the study, which I actually have, was because, we all like to dot our I's and cross our T's. And I sent out the email, and one of my friends was like, "Are you sure it said that?" And I'm like, "Yes, I'm sure it said that." Okay. So here's the direct quote. Some women with suspected IC-BPS were examined through a rigid cystoscopy without anesthesia. The representative image of the patient's bladder before and after valve bath treatment is shown in figure 4. The bladder of patients before treatment showed an inflammatory status represented by tiny vessels and the concomitant presence of Hunner's lesions. The Hunner's lesions are observed in women who have bladder diseases such as interstitial cystitis. Even if the cystoscopy is a qualitative analysis, after valve path treatment, the bladder showed a decrease of inflammation, a lighter color, and the Hunner's lesions appeared to have almost completely disappeared. Okay? That's straight from the paper. And so, and their conclusion was, yeah, we need more studies. But this is one of the most encouraging pilot studies I've ever seen. And I've looked at all the studies, most of the IC research in the last 30 years. And so one of the reasons why I kind of jumped on this is because I've worked with so many Hunner's lesion patients who they've tried everything and they're not better. And they're struggling with pain and they don't know what to do next. And here we have a simple over-the-counter product with a major study, outstanding safety profile, 4 months, affordable. As I ended my review of this thing, I said, I think this is worth further research for sure. And I think it might be worth a try, but I encourage you to do your own research. So go on over to the IC Network website. It's the first article in our research area. I mean, right on the front page, and read that. And then there are links to all the research I found. Now they've even been studying it with cancer. And since was diagnosed with breast cancer, I'm like, what the hell are you waiting for, Jill? So I'm taking it too now. Because I'm I'm encouraged by the safety profile and I'm encouraged by the research. So I think you need to look at it yourself and see if you want to give it a try. So we're sold out now, but I'll have it again shortly. I mean, that article resonated and it really reminded me that patients want hope and they want encouragement and they want relief. So we should have it more, hopefully Wednesday, hopefully. Okay. Lori says, what's the difference between cystomen and bladder ease? Is this for a particular phenotype? Well, we don't recommend bladder ease anymore. Bladder ease just was never, I mean, we carried it briefly, but it didn't sell. We had other products with validated research published in peer-reviewed journals that showed more success. And so my opinion is I don't want you to throw your money away on something, because there are some patients who spend $500 to $1,000 a month buying all sorts of different supplements. And it's like, who can afford that? Nobody. So I think it's important to use your money wisely. And so I look for research. And I know that the chondroitin-based supplements have the best research. And specifically, Dr. Theoreti's study with Sister Protect created the foundation for why we now believe chondroitin is a critical ingredient here. I think the better question, not is Cystomen and bladder ease, what's the difference between Cystomen, bladder builder, and bladder rest and Cysto Protect? Because those are the 4 chondroitin-based supplements that most patients turn to. So they all have a foundation of chondroitin and quercetin. So chondroitin for the coating effect, quercetin for the antihistaminic effect. And then Cysto Protect now has sodium hyaluronate in it. Cystomen has sodium hyaluronate in it. And I think Bladder Builder has sodium hyaluronate in it, which is another ingredient that can provide that coating effect. Bladder rest is the formula that is kind of the simplest, easiest formula. So we call it the starter formula. And that is for patients who are really, really sensitive. You know, if you're in that widespread pain subtype and you're chemically sensitive and you don't like taking anything, like I don't like taking anything because we're so prone to side effects, Bladder Builder is the one we encourage patients to try first because there's not a lot of ingredients in it that you might react to. Okay. If you're gung-ho and you're not really worried about side effects, I continue to believe that Bladder Builder is the best supplement on the market. So it's bladder rest with a few more ingredients in it. It's got some beneficial probiotics in it for the gut, but it has PEA in it, palmitoyl ethanolamide, to calm nerves down. So Bladder Builder is, in my opinion, the ideal supplement. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, these incisions are driving me crazy today. Cystomen, it has yet more ingredients. So it's got collagen in it. It's got some other ingredients in it that the company believes makes it even a stronger coating. So when we think about our phenotypes here, for example, if somebody's been on Elmeron and they want to get off of Elmeron because it's affecting their vision or their bowels, Cystomen is probably the strongest coating effect because it's just there's just more. It's like the supercharged version of a chondroitin supplement. For people with estrogen atrophy, where you just want to protect the bladder, we're going to do all 3. For people who are the widespread pain phenotype, then it's going to be, you don't need the chondroitin. You would just probably start with the PEA first, and let's see if the PEA is helpful. If the PEA works, great, works for me. If it doesn't, then they might put you on something like gabapentin or Neurontin. If you're struggling with recurring UTIs, then it would be Prevent or Allura. And we have Prevent in the IC Network shop. But now, of course, we have lactoferrin. And lactoferrin, we have a solid research showing that it's effective for recurring UTI. So maybe the lactoferrin first. And if that doesn't work, maybe then the Prevent. And of course, if none of the supplements work, then you go on to traditional therapies. And just know that that's not me saying that. That's the American Urology Association saying that. Their guidelines for IC, they want you to try the supplements before you try the traditional meds that have a greater risk of adverse events. So that's hard-coded and hard-written into their guidelines. And I agree with that strongly. I certainly don't want to take something that's going to damage my eyesight before I try something which has a really good safety profile and has a similar method of action. Make sense? Okay, got to put this, let's try putting this back on. Sorry. You know, this is me right now. This is just me dealing with the after effects of surgery. So my incisions go from armpit to armpit. And they've healed quite nicely. They're just all the nerves are turning on. Ugh, so annoying. Kind of wears on you after a while. They say it's a year recovery. That next July I should feel better. So I feel better with a little bit of compression. Ah, life. Life, 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 life. All right, so hold on a sec. Let me just look and see if I've got other things that I needed to talk about here. Hold on. All right. So you know about the medical marijuana interview, a survey. Um, and guys, if you didn't get our newsletter, come on over to the IC Network. You'll get a pop-up window, or you can go into the news pull down menu and just sign up. Listen, I hadn't sent out an email since last August. I'm not a spammer. You're not going to get email every week from me. And my emails don't sell stuff. I mean, it's not, the purpose of them is not to sell you things. The purpose of them is to give you an update on education and or clinical trials. All right. So we have new research from China on interferon as a possible treatment because of its antiviral effects. Let's look at that real quick. It was good enough that we decided to do a bigger article on it. Researchers in China have discovered a potential new treatment for IC patients, intravesical interferon. So it's put directly into the bladder. Interferons are a class of antiviral drugs typically used for serious viruses. Administering them directly into the bladders of IC patients through bladder instillation seems to be helping some, but not all patients. For a few years now, researchers have speculated viruses could be the root cause of IC for some patients. No definitive conclusion has yet been reached, but exploring antiviral treatments as options seems like the next logical step, and they are doing that right now. The types of viruses behind IC for some patients are generally polyoma BK or JC viruses. Both are common viruses which most of the population has been exposed to, and both are viruses that stay in your body once you have it. Usually these viruses remain dormant, but occasionally they can wake up and start causing symptoms of infection. Researchers chose interferon because it treats both of the polyoma viruses well. So this was a randomized clinical trial of 52 women, average age of 50, had symptoms an average of 4 years. The patients were split between two groups, one treated with instillations of interferon, one treated with instillations of hyaluronic acid, which just coats the bladder. The women received the medication once a week for 4 weeks and once a month for 4 months. Each medication was held in the bladder for at least 30 minutes. The findings during the one month and 3 month patient assessment, neither group showed a statistical difference based on their pain scores. At the 6 month assessment, though, both groups of patients showed a significant difference, with 77% of patients receiving interferon and 46% of the patients receiving hyaluronic acid had a significant improvement in their symptoms. Only 2 adverse reactions were reported, and both were minimal. 15% of the interferon group, 8% of the hyaluronic acid group had bladder irritation immediately after the installations that cleared on its own within a week without medical treatment. And second, 12% of the interferon group and 8% of the hyaluronic acid group had a UTI. Okay, that's curious. Isn't that interesting? So again, that's another potential treatment for patients who have an active viral infection. I have the holiday survival tip article. Also, take care of yourself with a self-care calendar. Which and Stacey Shannon, the writer for the IC Network, wrote two wonderful self-care articles that I think would be helpful. We did release a new video in our IC 101 masterclass. This video is on why food matters. From the IC Diet Project, I've got Simple Savory Dishes for the Holidays by Julie Beyer. Listen, if somebody online saying that they're the IC dietitian, that is wrong. The first dietitian, who happens to be a personal friend of mine 30 years ago, who is advocating for the needs of IC patients, is Julie Beyer, the author of I've got two of her books. Where are they? She's got 3 books. Huh, where did I put them? Oh, here it is. Oops. Stay. Okay, Julie Beyer. Let's give Julie Beyer the credit she deserves, because she was the first registered dietitian to work on behalf of IC patients, and she is a lovely, lovely woman. She and I, we are peers. She has been invaluable to all of our work with IC and diet. So the first book she wrote was Customizing the IC Diet. And she's got a food list in here, lots of recipes. But this book is great because she also has a grocery list in here. We never thought of doing a grocery list. So her recipes in here are great. She's also a contributing writer to our IC Diet Project website, which is icdietproject.com. That's where we do all of our food work. Yeah, I got her grocery list. It's just so good. So she's got, for example, our 3-column food list right here. And a sample grocery list. So with all due respect to the younger dietitian who's got lots of ads on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram, with all due respect, Julie Beyer deserves the credit. Her second book is Confident Choices, a cookbook for IC and OAB. And her recipes are all tested recipes, really, really good. Some are stir fry, vanilla scented butternut squash risotto, spaghetti squash, baked chicken nuggets. Man, you know what? I should make that. Cinnamon coffee cake muffin. I mean, she's got baked goods, she's got salad dressing, she's got soups. And then, most importantly, this is the book she wrote for registered dietitians to teach them about IC and why diet is so important. Interstitial Cystitis, a guide for nutrition educators. Okay, and this book came out and we sell these every week, along with our book, the IC Chef Cookbook. Honey, this came out in 2010. It's still an outstanding book, okay? And then if you haven't seen, let's see. Let me just show you a couple of the books that I think are All right. I'm missing one. Where is my? I see. Oh, here it is. Okay. So on the diet front, we also have, this is the book that I did, the IC Chef Cookbook. And this is our biggest cookbook. It contains all the recipes that we collected in our support forum. So this was really a project of IC patients just like you. And this too has lots of appendices, fighting constipation with fiber, more books on the IC diet, frequently asked questions, and then it's got a comprehensive list of the foods. So the IC Chef Cookbook is my baby. But I think it's important, I don't want you to rely just on the IC network. I mean, there's a lot of good writers out there, avail yourself of the wisdom of not only what we do, but also what Julie does. Of course, the IC Chef Cookbook is truly my baby. We will be doing more. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it into chapters and sell each chapter as a small PDF, because people don't want to read books. They want it short and sweet. And so I'm trying to adapt to meet that need. So anyway, IC Chef Cookbook. There's no diagrams so much in this book, except for our IC friendly pelvic exercises. Anyway, love this book. This book is awesome. When It Hurts Down There by Dr. Angie Storr. She's a urologist in the Atlanta area. 15 proven techniques to alleviate pelvic pain. I think for anybody with pelvic pain, it's short, it's sweet, it's easy to understand. It explains so much about, how pain is processed, how you can interfere with pain processing to reduce pain. Here, hold on a sec. So in her chapter, Alleviating Pain by Targeting Body Pain Processes. Now that you have a background for understanding how pain starts and is processed in the body, let's get to some techniques for alleviating pain in this part of the signaling pathway. The first and probably most important thing you can do to improve your pain is to slow down the immune system and reduce inflammation. The most effective way to do this is to change your diet. Yeah, that's simple. Changing what you eat will significantly improve your pain. The second way to reduce inflammation and immune system activation is to add back and support good bacteria with prebiotics and probiotics. The third thing you can do is to avoid taking antibiotics. And finally, start exercising. So here's just changing your diet. Your diet is a huge factor affecting inflammation in the body. You feel what you eat. If you eat foods that cause inflammation, you will have more pain. The way certain foods cause inflammation is not completely understood, but it is certain that many foods affect the microbiome. The foods do this by allowing microbiome bacteria to release bad chemicals into the bloodstream. This causes the body to react by revving up the immune system and releasing chemicals that cause inflammation. This inflammation is picked up by the gut brain, which then communicates to the head brain. Good microbes can also revolt and start helping with digestion when your diet is off. Unfortunately, our mouths tend to like some of the foods that microbes don't. But remember, if you treat your good bacteria well, they'll respond by reducing your pain. You should be friends with your good bacteria. They are powerful allies. So what does she say? Number 1, avoiding foods that cause inflammation, including gluten, refined carbs, fried food, processed meat, red meat, margarine shortening, and lard. And I gotta say, my friends, I definitely feel better when I avoid gluten. The only white bread I eat comes from a specific bakery that uses, it's a French bakery, and I don't get bloated and gassy when I get their bread, or I do Ezekiel bread. I don't eat fried food. I don't eat processed meat except for occasionally some sliced turkey. I don't eat red meat. I do eat like a tiny bit of margarine. Um, I mean, things like, just the pictures in this are so good. The refined carbs increase your blood sugar, which causes insulin release, which causes inflammation, which causes insulin resistance, which, you get stuck in these vicious cycles. I don't know. Did y'all see, what was it last night? Remember, our big businesses, they've been talking a lot about billionaires and are billionaires good for us? And the answer is, I don't think they are, because they're very profit motivated. And the best example of that are the tobacco companies, which for years made billions selling cigarettes knowing that they were going to kill people. Well, finally, the US government and the research proved that tobacco kills people. And so we were able to get that back. Well, those same companies then bought the food company. And now they have deliberately used that same model. They've created processed foods that drive the addiction to food, because they know the more you eat it, the more money they make. So how do they drive addiction in food? By sugar and fat. And so they're doing it again. They're making billions knowing that they're killing people. She says here, avoid the common irritants for the bladder. Reduce your intake of oxalates, modify intake of foods associated with endometriosis, like red meat, canned fruit. Isn't that interesting? Fruit in itself isn't bad, but canning it may cause issues. The theory behind this is that pesticides used in fruit growing may be causing changes in estrogen. Yeah, when I buy canned fruit, I only buy organic canned fruit. High fat diets and high fat are linked to increased inflammation in the pelvis, leading to the development and worsening of endometriosis. Fresh fruit has a lower risk. Fresh vegetables have a lower risk, and dairy has a lower risk. Technique number 6, adding and supporting good bacteria in your gut. Technique number 7, avoiding unnecessary antibiotics. Technique number 8, exercising. Exercise actually changes the makeup of your gut biome. When you exercise, it increases the amount of good bacteria, increases the diversity of bacteria, and helps the good bacteria thrive. And exercise doesn't need to be intense to get this effect. Just walking for 30 minutes 3 times a week is enough to improve your health. And I think the thing in this book that I find the most entertaining, she talks about the brain, but it's really easy to read, guys. A high school student could read this and understand it. One of the things she talks about, pain processing. So what can you do? Here, hold on. How do you alleviate pain by targeting brain processing? Number 1, I love this. I absolutely love this. Use foul language when the pain is really intense. If you've ever hit your thumb with a hammer or stubbed your toe on a table, you probably sworn if you that kind of reactive vocalization is it's in the lower, here, hold on. I'm trying to read it off a monitor. That kind of reactive vocalization starts in the lower brain gateway. It's a spontaneous reaction to the pain, and it actually reduces the pain signal. I'm not suggesting that you picking up a general swearing habit. This only works well when you're not accustomed to using foul language regularly. I love that. Number 2, start meditating. I find meditating very hard. Number 3, deep breathing. That's important because when you bring in oxygen, you calm down fight or flight. Number 4, using happiness techniques, positivity. The way to interfere with pain in the emotional processing area is to have more happy emotions and less unhappy ones. Pain is processed faster when it's linked to unhappy emotions like fear, guilt, anger, disgust, hatred, or rejection. The brain assumes that if you're unhappy, the pain signals may be more important. Pain is processed slower when it's linked to positive emotions like happiness, love, calmness, interest, enthusiasm, passion, and gratitude. Exercising, yoga, Pilates, and then she talks specifically about interval training. When you're making your body work hard to coordinate functions such as heart rate, it gets too busy to process pain. That's what I want to start doing. I used to do intervals all the time, but I haven't since COVID. Anyway, guys, this book is on the IC Network website. Super easy. If you get this book, I promise you it will help you better manage your pain and work with your doctor as you're exploring more pain management methods. Pain management is not just medication. There are things you can do internally to calm the way your brain processes pain. This is another book, the Explain Pain Handbook, the Protectometer. It's quite interesting. It's quite interesting. Why do I hurt or not hurt? Your nervous system really looks out for you. It wants to protect you. Pain, first and foremost, and without exception, exists to protect and preserve you. Some people even call it a gift. We understand this can be a difficult concept when pain is persistent and nasty, but even then, you're hurting because your brain has decided that you are threatened and in danger. It's all about context. So what is context? Your context is the location, situation, and current setting you find yourself in, along with your beliefs, values, understanding, and knowledge that you bring with you. Overall, context provides a unique meaning to your experience. Anyway, it has like lots of questions. So like I wrote here, have you had a situation when your pain persisted for a long time when perhaps you shouldn't have? And I wrote vulvodynia, IBS, sensitive skin, and surgical incisions. More reflections on pain. Did the amount of pain always match the severity of the injury? Give some examples. And I wrote that tooth pain and mosquito bites hurt more than they should for me because, hello, I'm a redhead. Oh, we redheads. Mandy says, when it hurts down there is amazing. I'm so glad you got it, hon. It's good, isn't it? She says, we spoke months ago and I went forward with InterStim anyway. It was 100% thankful. Good. I'm glad it worked for you. Just be on it. Monitor it, okay? You got to monitor it. Monica says, when I was on antibiotics for treating my UTI, my bladder pain went through the roof. The same happened no matter which antibiotics I was on. I never got any relief for being on antibiotics. I just have a hard time figuring out what's the root cause of my bladder pain. So Monica, they did did they do a hydrodistension? And if they did, what did they find in your bladder? Because it kind of sounds like you have Hunner's lesion. You know, that would make sense. You know, some antibiotics are quite caustic. Some antibiotics will hurt the bladder. It's a chemical reaction. And in IC patients, we are particularly vulnerable to that. So medications like Augmentin, Cipro, are well known to be more irritating to the bladder than, say, Keflex. But the fact that your bladder is so reactive suggests that you have either a very injured bladder wall, Hunner's lesions, or you have very, very sensitive nerves. So what I would want to know is, what did they find when they looked in your bladder? Is it healthy or is it injured? Number two, what is the health of your pelvic floor? Is it tight? And if you want, we can go into Zoom and talk. It's fine. Nancy says, what do I think about the IC diet? The IC diet works for some, but not all patients. If you have Hunner's lesions, the IC diet's critical. If you've got estrogen atrophy, chemical injury of the bladder, the diet's critical. If you've got widespread pain, the diet is critical for a different reason because you're going to want to avoid things that are neurostimulatory. The patients who are not as diet sensitive are patients who are more pelvic floor driven. Like I'm not diet sensitive now. Mary said, "Where's that book from?" It was created by Dr. Angie Storr, and it is published by Dr. Angie Storr, the Storr Center for Pelvic and Intimate Pain, and their website is pelvicpain.center, www.pelvicpain.center. But we have it in the IC Network shop. She's wonderful. And I need to reread it. You know, like I really do need to reread this. Yeah, I should. Sandra says, okay, well, Nydia asked, Ms. Osborne, could you tell me what are the requirements to have a Zoom meeting with you? Well, we can go into a Zoom right now. I just set it up and give you a link to go into it. As long as you have an iPhone or a computer that will go in, then it should be fine. Ideally, you have your microphone on so that I can actually hear you talking, and I would prefer that you have your video on so that I can see your face. But if you don't want to do that, that's fine too. And those are not recorded. It's just an opportunity for you to ask questions to me, with a small group of patients. Sandra said, my doctor wants to put me on cyclosporin. What do I think? Cyclosporin, you know what? Let's just go straight to the AUA guidelines here, and let's give you the facts first, and then I will give you my opinion. So cyclosporin A is an immunosuppressant medication. It may be offered to patients with Hunner's lesions who are not responding to fulguration or steroid injection. One study found that 75% of patients experienced an improvement of their symptoms compared to just 19% of patients who used Elmeron. Success rates are much higher in patients with Hunner's lesions, with 85% responding to treatment when compared to just 30% without lesions. The potential for adverse events is high, including increased serum creatinine, hypertension, alopecia, cutaneous lymphoma, mouth ulcers, and acute gout. Okay, now let me just go, hold on a sec. So that is what I took out of the AUA guidelines, but let me just go to the AUA guidelines here real quick. Okay, so AUA guidelines, oral cyclosporin A may be offered to patients with Hunner's lesions refractory to fulguration or triamcinolone. Okay, so hold on a sec. Okay, here it is. One randomized trial one randomized trial that compared cyclosporin to pentosan Elmeron resulted in 75% of patients experiencing a clinically significant improvement. In addition, 38% of the cyclosporin reported a 50% decrease in frequency compared with 0 with the Elmeron group. Two observational studies reported similar high rates of efficacy, including significant pain relief in 91% of patients after 6 weeks of treatments, accompanied by a decrease in frequency and increases in voiding volumes. And after an average 1-year treatment, 87% of patients reported that they were pain-free with similar improvements in voiding parameters. In the second study, some patients had been followed for more than 5 years with continued reports of efficacy as long as the medication was maintained. However, adverse events were higher in the cyclosporin arm, um, with 3 serious adverse events, including increased blood pressure, increased serum creatinine, and 1 serious adverse event in the Pitocin. Okay. There's more studies. Taken together, these data suggest sustained efficacy, particularly in patients with Hunner's lesions with active bladder inflammation. However, because of the relatively small number of patients treated, the lack of long-term follow-in data on large numbers of patients, and the potential for serious adverse events, the panel judged some uncertainty remains in the balance between the benefits versus the risks. The decision to take oral cyclosporin, therefore, is an option. Patients taking cyclosporin A should have a close monitoring, especially for renal function and blood pressure. A monitoring protocol should also take into account the risk of liver toxicity, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? As well as malignancies like skin cancer and lymphoma. Okay. So, our AUA guidelines are focused on benefits versus risks. You have to evaluate the benefits versus risks. They, in general, want you to try the easy stuff before you would try the more dangerous stuff. So, cyclosporin was a step 5 treatment option in the last round of guidelines. And so it was one of the final options for patients to consider. Today, we have a lot more information. So today, given the inflammation issue, what makes sense to me would be to try the lactoferrin first, since that also exhibits a very, very strong anti-inflammatory effect in a published study, before diving into a medication like cyclosporin, which has potentially very, very severe adverse events. So that's kind of point number 1. Point number 2 is that cyclosporin for some patients has truly been a bit of a miracle drug. And I'm thinking of one of my members, a very, very good member that I've known for many, many years, with very, very severe IC. And cyclosporin was a game changer for her. It reduced her pain so much so that she was able to dramatically reduce her pain medication, and it kept her working. The challenge is that she is a teacher in a high school, and teachers are breeding grounds of infection, and cyclosporin impacts and reduces your immune system. And so you become much more vulnerable to colds and things like that. So I think that it is important to do a bit more reading about it first, so that you really understand and are informed of the risk. So in her case, for example, she developed very, very severe high blood pressure, like literally 220 over 150, like emergency room hospitalization, danger of dying. And she didn't know it was happening, and then it happened, and she ended up in the hospital. And so now they have her on blood pressure medications to keep that under control, but her blood pressure still spikes every now and then. So, I would consider it a last option to consider other than bladder removal, to be honest. If you want to talk about it, feel free to give me a phone call this week. I'd be happy to talk to you about it. Nydia says, just go to our website, icnetwork.org. Phone number is up at the top. It's an 800 number. I'm sorry, I have the number kind of blocked here. 800-928-7496. This week is very open. Last week was very busy. This week I'm going to be a lot more available. But Mondays are my day off, so I won't be answering the phone tomorrow until after 2. But Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you're good. Give me a phone call. Diane says, what about Tagamet for nocturia? Well, I mean, Tagamet, I used to take Tagamet for My bowel spasms. Is there research? So it reduces stomach acid production, cimetidine, but is there any research that shows that it does? In a study of 36 patients, cimetidine significantly improved nocturia and suprapubic pain in patients with IC. Okay, so I guess I would play devil's advocate with you. So cimetidine, Tagamet works by reducing acid. So what does that mean then? It means that your nighttime urination nocturia is being driven by bladder irritation caused by acid. So the most logical thing to look at first is your diet. Are you eating things that are high in acid that would be driving your nocturia? Would it be, I mean, that simple cup of coffee every day would easily be an underlying cause of nighttime nocturia. So I would look first at your diet. Is there room for improvement there? Remember, you can use pre-leaf when you eat or drink something acidic to reduce acid level. My concern would be that you would use that as a justification to keep drinking a lot of coffee. And you just have to understand that your bladder's not going to heal if you keep pouring bad things in it. I mean, the Tagamet would reduce some of that irritation, but our goal is healing here. If you had a wound on your hand, would you pour coffee on it? Of course not. Would you pour coffee on it every day? Well, you shouldn't. What would happen if I'd poured coffee on my incisions every day? Would they have healed? No, they would have gotten much, much worse. So I'm not against it. I used Tagamet when I was in my 20s, when I was really suffering with a lot of stomach problems and bowel problems and spasms. I would just say, are you following the really easy self-help stuff too? If that makes sense. Diane, listen, I'm not chewing you out in any way, shape, or form. You got to realize I work with IC patients every day, almost every single day, pretty much every day. And I can't tell you the number of times I have had patients that I've worked with. We phenotype them. They've got Hunner's lesions or they've got estrogen atrophy, bladder wall driven symptoms. And I go, so you following the diet? Oh yeah, I'm fine. Like, yeah, but you're getting up a lot at night. Got to be a reason why you're getting up at night. Okay. And then, it takes about 15 minutes and they're like, no, well, yeah, no, I definitely have a cup of coffee a day. And it's like, oh, okay. That's why your bladder is so irritated. That's why you're getting up at night. A lot of patients have tried to bluff me, but I'm very persistent and ask a lot of questions. And eventually you yield and you tell me the truth. It's interesting. All right, guys. Well, I think we're kind of done. What do you think? I hope that you're enjoying the holidays right now. I mean, this is the best part of the holiday season because we just get to, decorate, start play a little bit of music, de-stress everything. Go for peaceful and joyful this year. Spend a day baking. Spend a day with your friends. Try to pick one holiday for everybody, one tradition for everybody in the family. Everybody gets a tradition. If your child wants to go ice skating, take them ice skating one day. If you've got another one that wants to go caroling, carol. What's your tradition? What's your IC friendly tradition? Mine is baking. Just baking. I always spend a weekend baking Norwegian Christmas bread and old family recipe. Love making it. Last year, because now we can't do saturated fat, we can't do butter, my sister and I, because we've had our gallbladders removed, which sucks. Oh my God. You know, when you have your gallbladder removed, your body, you have to cut way back on your fat. That's why I've lost so much weight in the last year, because I don't eat butter anymore. I don't eat cream anymore. I don't eat anything, hardly anything with butter in it. I use a low fat margarine, tiny, tiny amount of that. And even then, if you screw up and you have too much saturated fat, you want to be in the bathroom the next day with bile induced diarrhea. And it sucks. I ate a half an avocado like on Monday, and I paid the price on Tuesday. And so for baking for Christmas, I'm now cooking, I'm trying to cook with olive oil. And there are olive oil cookies, and I made some good ones last year, but I also made an olive oil Norwegian Christmas bread, and it was awesome. So I'm going to try to make that again this year, yeast bread. So I hope you get to enjoy something wonderful. Anyway, well, listen, I think we're done. Last call. If anybody wants to go into Zoom, all you have to do is ask. Otherwise, I will see you next Sunday. Knock on wood, no earthquakes. All right. Goodbye, YouTube. Be well.